Okay, good afternoon, everyone, or good evening or good morning, depending on where you're joining from. We are officially live now. We'll just give it a couple of more minutes for the numbers to rise. We can see number of people joining us, but let's give it another minute. So it's 3:01 in India right now. We'll just give it another 30, 40 seconds. For those of you who are just joining us, a very, very warm welcome. The numbers are slowly climbing up, and we'll get started in just another few seconds. Okay, let's start. Good afternoon again, and again, good morning or good evening, depending on what time zone you're joining from. And a very warm welcome to the session today. I'm delighted to be anchoring the first in a series of leadership conversations by GCC Pulse in collaboration with Stryde on the occasion of International Women's Day. GCC Pulse is a global storytelling and media platform centered on the GCC ecosystem, bringing together leaders, analysts, storytellers, experts, and stakeholders for knowledge sharing, collaboration, and talent development. Sushil Kumar is the founder of GCC Pulse, and I would like to sincerely thank him for the platform today. At Stride, we work with GCCs and other organizations, both in person and virtually, partnering on leadership development, culture building, and coaching. This year's International Women's Day, Give to Gain, the theme is Give to Gain, which is subtle but powerful. As the name suggests, we've moved beyond awareness, beyond symbolic gestures, and the theme invites action. While progress has been made, inequity still shows up, not always loudly, but often quietly and very subtly, perhaps in meetings, in access, in visibility, in sponsorship. And that's what today's session is aimed at, to uncover some of this. So, thank you for giving us 60 minutes of your valuable time today. Through this conversation, we really hope for you to walk away with one or two key perspectives on inclusion and perhaps one or two key actions that we can all individually take. I'm truly honored and delighted to be joined by three industry leaders today who bring deep leadership and people insight. Jyothi, if you could just wave out. Jyothi is the HR head for Consilio for APAC and Middle East and has varied experience in HR, global operations management, and customer service. Jyothi is a DEI and culture champion based in Bangalore. Thank you so much for joining us today. Ramya, if you could wave out as well. Thank you. Ramya is the HR head for SMBC Global Services and is currently based in Chennai. Ramya's experience spans across talent and culture, learning and development, DEI roles, and we're so glad that Ramya could be with us today. I'm delighted to have Harish here. Harish, if you could wave as well. Harish is the HR head for Ameriprise Financial Services based in Gurgaon. Harish has extensive experience in the financial services industry and has worked pretty much across the globe. A very, very warm welcome, and thank you so much on behalf of GCC Pulse and Stride for joining us today. I'd like to set expectations in terms of how the webinar is going to be run. So in the first 30 minutes, we'll explore the topic of inclusivity from 3 different lenses. The first is awareness. Where does bias typically show up in the workplace? And what are the consequences of that? The second would be around behaviors. What do inclusive leaders do differently? And the third is really moving into an action oriented lens. What can we give differently to expand equity? So, really aligned to the theme for this year, which is give to gain. And don't worry, we have a lot of opportunity for audience interaction as well. So, we'll keep the last 15-20 minutes for your questions. The Q&A box is completely functional, and you are invited to sort of put your questions there, and we will address it towards the end. A quick call out, do stay tuned for the full hour. We have an interesting rapid fire towards the end, and we will be putting our speakers on the spot. Okay, let's get a pulse of the room first before we kind of get started. So I will request for a quick poll to come up. Should come up on the screen or in the chat functionality on the chat box. And the question really is, if inclusion is about sharing equity, where is it least shared in the workplace? And the options are stretch roles and visibility, sponsorship and mentoring, succession and promotions, and fair performance decisions. I want to quickly check if you can see the poll. Great. And I can see the numbers are slowly climbing up. So far, succession and promotions is leading, but we've also got fair promotion decisions. So I would encourage everyone to respond to this. It should be in the chat box. And there's 16 responses so far. We'd love to see more come in. And let it be an instinctive response. Where do you typically see inequity still showing up? Okay, the numbers are climbing up, so we'll give it another 30 seconds. But of course, you have the option to continue to respond to this. Interesting to see that a large part of it is succession and promotion decisions. Okay, I'm not going to keep you much longer away from the panel, and I know you're all really wanting to hear from the panel speakers. So my question, and that it's a nice segue to the first part, which is around awareness. And my question to the panel, and I'll request Ramya to take it on first. Ramya, where do you see bias showing up most in the workplace? And what are some consequences that you also see of that? If you could share a couple of examples and perhaps consequences.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dia, for this opportunity, and thanks everyone for your valuable time. Please allow me to indulge and invite you to a very simple exercise, right? Can I request all of you to close your eyes? Just close your eyes, really, and visualize everything I say. Imagine a CEO walking into a room. What does the person look like? How old are they? What is their gender? How are they dressed? Just slowly open your eyes. I'm not looking for an answer, but I can almost certainly say that 90% of the times or more, we are imagining a senior male CEO in a suit, right? This simple exercise illustrates how deeply these leadership stereotypes are embedded in our minds, right? So bias is real in workplaces or outside. There are a couple of individuals who've written this beautiful book, Joan C. Williams and Rachel Dempsey. in their book called What Works for Women at Work, talk about 4 recurring obstacles for women, right? Number 1, prove it again. The very fact that women are measured on performance, however, men are measured on potential. Number 2, they talk about the tightrope where women must balance the act of being competent, but also being likable. Number 3, they talk about the maternal wall, where there's a misconception that women who are mothers tend to assume lesser responsibilities at work. And finally, the tug of war, where women are competing against other women because there are only fewer opportunities. Specifically, if you look at the tightrope obstacle, the authors are calling out what we know as the likability bias, right? Now, why does it matter? If you look at feedback conversations, an assertive woman is typically labeled as aggressive. However, an assertive man is labeled as assertive. If you look at collaborative women, they are sometimes viewed as not leadership material. Direct communication styles is not always appreciated when it's from a woman, right? Now, why does all of this matter? Because likability bias can influence your promotion decisions, your performance reviews. It can change leadership perceptions, and it can also change the feedback language. So bias, once again, I want to call out by saying bias is real. In fact, the 2025 global gender gap report by the World Economic Forum mentions that it would still take another 123 years for global gender equality. Now, what does it mean simply? You and I will never see full gender parity in our lifetime. So again, while bias is real, it is not good or bad, it's not right or wrong, but it impacts our everyday people and business decisions. So it becomes dangerous and counterproductive if not mitigated well. So for me, the tightrope where women have the need to show their competency over and over again and also be in a position of likability is the biggest bias that continues to happen in the workplaces even today.
Thank you, Ramya. I think that visualization exercise was extremely powerful. And I think there are a lot of other typical stereotypes that we tend to hear of. What does an engineer look like? Or what does a nurse look like? Or let's say even what a fitness instructor looks like. So biases is really everywhere. On this particular question, I'd love to bring Harish into the conversation as well. Harish, would love to hear your thoughts in terms of where you see this playing out, and particularly in some of the leadership experiences you've had globally.
Yeah, no, I think Ramya has quite beautifully summarized the overall picture. There is very little to kind of add what she has said. But I think sad reality is that these biases are absolutely real, as Ramya called out. But more importantly, sadly, they exist across all spectrum of HR processes, workplace processes. It's not one area that you could say that has got issues which we can kind of work toward fixing it. That's not the case. Whether you look at the hiring practices, whether you look at the performance, you yourself kind of polled just now that succession and promotions are kind of key areas where biases or inclusion is lacking. Um, and similarly, compensation, well proven worldwide, even the leadership role, well proven worldwide that those are not kind of giving us the proportionate I guess representation, and there are built-in biases, and that visualization that Ramya uh, got us to kind of think about, it was so powerful and so kind of real that there's only one image that we can see, and that's tied to the most of the roles. There are certain roles. If you think of admin assistant, most of us will probably think of a female colleague, whereas if you think of a CEO or scientist or whatever, you'll think of only male colleague of yours. So biases are there and well deep rooted. I didn't know about the study that uh, projects that it will take 120 years, but I knew that it will take a long time before we kind of get to the other side. Um, But 120 is appalling, actually, that collectively we have a task in hand to kind of do something meaningful in our lifetime. So biases are real, biases are deep rooted. We need to kind of urgently kind of prioritize this.
Absolutely. And bias is the biggest barrier to inclusion, but it's totally human. If we're human, we're bound to have, it's natural to have biases. I'd love to hear from you, Jyothi, in terms of what's your take on this question.
Thank you, Diya. Thank you, Ramya and Harish. Um, very true when we talk stereotypes, and the 120 year is also real. When you really imagine that whether your children or their children's children are going to see parity there or equity there. I want to now probably shift the conversation slightly from women face bias to the ecosystem carries cumulative bias. And I probably talk from my own experience. I see bias operating at two levels, individual and cumulative. There is bias in our own heads, but there is also the cumulative bias in the ecosystem, stereotypes and expectations that uh, both Ramya and Harish spoke about, as well as what we have actually normalized over decades. And what shows up at the workplace is often compounded outcome of both. Many years ago, we were having a similar session. This was an in-person session. A male colleague walked up to me after that, and what he said stayed with me. He worked shifts. He could hardly spend meaningful time with his 5-year-old daughter. He wanted to ask for a shift change, but he hesitated, not because the system would not allow it, but because he worried how it would reflect on him. Would he be seen as less committed? And we have also seen the aerial ad of, share the load, right? So does bias really only constrain women? Men experience bias too. And the same ecosystem that expects women to primarily caregive also expects men to be the primary breadwinner. I talk about it and I think a lot about it is because I have a son. And I'm sure that the kind of expectations that he would grow up to is something that I would want to see as equitable to him and his partner. Largely so, right? There are exceptions. But expectations create strain and it shapes career choices long before promotion decisions happen. And when we saw succession and promotion going high, you could see that the foundation there is the reason for that, right? So when we talk about awareness, it's not just thinking about recognizing bias against women, it's about recognizing that the ecosystem of expectations that we ourselves have normalized. And unfortunately, so it shapes choices, it shapes ambition, it even shapes guilt in our minds. And there is fatigue. And this is something that I'm extremely conscious about is that we have to acknowledge something uncomfortable, that there is fatigue around gender conversations. And I don't think it's because people don't care. We are all here because we care. And fatigue sets in when conversations stay at the level of metrics, but the lived ecosystem, our lived experiences doesn't shift. And this fatigue is not because of resistance, it's because of the underlying tension, trying to change workplace norms while the outer ecosystem norms remain unchanged, right? So I know that I've probably shifted from, the focus on gender, but for me, it is about understanding the full system. If we address one without the other, we will keep treating symptoms, not the system.
Thank you, Jyothi. I think that was beautiful. And I think the whole bias and stereotype piece needs to be expanded because all of us experience it in some shape and form. It's about how we sort of course correct to be intentionally inclusive rather than to be unintentionally exclusive. And there is this popular research that I've read in terms of high performing surgical teams, and there was something that they did fundamentally shift. They would have everyone in the room sort of introduce themselves and their role. So whether and irrespective of hierarchy, so whether it was a nurse or a medical assistant, they all had the opportunity to introduce themselves at the start of the shift. And with that particular team, the complication rate was much lower. It was because they had sort of built in that psychological safety and normalized people for people to speak up. So that the behaviors that high performing and inclusive teams build is so important. um, and I'd love for this to be a segue to the next question that I have for the panel. And this time, if I could have Harish take it on first. Harish, from your perspective, what do inclusive managers and leaders do differently behaviorally? What are those differentiating behaviors that they demonstrate on a daily basis?
Sure, dear. I think the most important aspect for any individual to be at their best is if they could bring full self to the workplace. They have to be themselves. They don't need to pretend to be someone else at all. And I think anything that kind of help people to be themselves at the workplace, it goes in the kind of in the direction of helping create an environment where we all can be ourselves and do the best thing that we are capable of doing. In my experience of over 30 years and having seen kind of some great leaders over the years in various parts of the world, I feel that there are some leaders who naturally kind of do this really well, and we are always kind of attracted to them. We kind of do like not just the best version, but we kind of give it 200% of our effort in terms of making things happen. And it happens so naturally. It's not at all linked to that they have promised us any promotion or a big comp prize or any of the other kind of hard incentive. We just do it because we really love kind of working for them. And I think over the year, I've realized they do those sort of kind of leaders do very simple things, but they do those simple things right every time or most of the time. And it's less about what, it's about how part. In my view, how part is inclusive of both said and unsaid things in the room. Simple things I've seen that if they're sitting in a meeting setting, they would be kind of more focused on the people who are saying little. They would want to kind of include them in the conversation, and they will kind of give them fair time, but then will make sure that they have had chance to hear from them. And usually, I think, again, what I've seen over the year is that quieter people happen to be one particular gender as against the other person. So if you have a leader who's kind of actively engaging you, inviting you in the conversation, and then you are part of that conversation. So it happens again, very simple thing. It's very easy to notice in a meeting of say 10 people to notice that okay, these two people are not saying much. Kind of calling them out in terms of inviting them to participate and say their mind is not like rocket science. Similarly, I think I've also noticed that some of the leaders do really well that from time to time they set really high standards for themselves. They show the mirror to their own actions and vocabulary that they are using on a day-to-day basis. One particular leader I used to work, he would kind of occasionally come and ask that for this meeting I would record, and this is well before we kind of all kind of got comfortable to the Zoom and Teams environment of working. He would kind of record in a kind of team setting and purely to kind of see that how he is coming across to his kind of participants, basically to test out is his language need kind of updation, is kind of vocabulary is still kind of fit for purpose, is he still kind of fit for purpose in terms of all the people who are attending those meetings, or is he still kind of very stereotyped because there were some of those people were working with him for a little longer time, some were new and all those sort of things. So he would do that. Again, nothing was, again, very simple thing for us to kind of quickly kind of check once in a while. But he would do that as a kind of practice. And the last but not least, I think we most of the time, as you kind of get to the leadership level, you feel that intuitively you know things, how things happen. And again, intuition sadly has got deeper biases that we have talked about earlier. Again, no right or wrong answer on these sort of thing, but as long as for most of your processes that you're providing leadership on, if you have an objective criteria, your structured approach, whether it's a hiring decision, promotion decision, succession decision, you name it, um, anything that can be objectively described or structurally kind of put forward, chances are that you will kind of do away with many biases that kind of take place on a day-to-day basis. So behaviorally, I've seen leaders do these sort of simple things very well, and sort of assessing every few months their own performance without anybody asking them to do that is probably something that I've seen work out really well, and that's what I try to kind of be better at myself as a leader.
Thank you so much, Harish. I think rightfully said, like you said, the daily rituals and the choice of vocabulary. And the choice of vocabulary sort of made me reflect on an example of bias that I recently faced. Um, Someone referred to leaders as him or uh, him or he, completely negating the fact that there's an entire generation. I mean, women could also be leaders. So instead of referring to them as them or they, and that's an example that came to mind when you spoke about vocabulary. I'd love to hear from you, Jyothi, in terms of, what are some rituals, daily rituals, behaviors that you recommend or you would love for everyone to sort of embrace in the workplace?
Could really relate to what Harish was talking. And yeah, I did imagine my own leaders who could naturally pull that off, right? And you learn a lot working with such leaders. Um, there, there are a few things in my mind, and maybe we'll go in order. Um, I've worked with a few organizations as well as external parties where we have been focused on, okay, how do we make sure that we have women development sessions or programs, right? Now, there was, and this was again, maybe more than a decade ago, there was a lady who actually stood up and she asked, why is it that this is so focused on women? Do we not think that men require development? That actually, and do we have specific men development programs based on their gender, right? So that was an eye opener at that point in time, because I'm sure organizations are doing this all intentionally well to make sure that we're able to bring in the right people in terms of diversity into senior roles. But it did click on something, which is again bias, right? And when we talk about bias, how do we interrupt bias again and again is a big question. And leaders who probably focus on that, in my view, have done really well in addressing the challenges that we talk about. Harish, you mentioned about intuition, and that's deeply ingrained. And when we talk about intuition, what came to my mind is that, yeah, bias happens when there is speed and when there is informality, because a lot of that comes from your gut, right? And interruption requires structure. It is hard to do. And bias will disappear when we build interruption points in decisions. Let me give you practical examples, right? Are we pausing before making some talent decisions on, are we rewarding confidence or are we rewarding competence? Something that Ramya mentioned as well, right, earlier, potential versus performance when people are considered for promotions. Are we questioning language while we are discussing? Um, so if someone says that this person is not ready, uh, in most cases, I've observed that it is a woman that we are talking about. But the question then to ask is not ready. Okay, based on what evidence? So, can we bring evidence into play? When we look at succession pipelines and shortlisting people, are we diversifying that? Are we rotating visible opportunities, and are we doing in all fairness and intentionally? So when we do such things and we start to interrupt bias, what happens is it doesn't remain a moral science lecture on inclusion, right? It becomes more of a governance muscle, and we start to build it. And that is really, really required when we think about day-to-day foundation work that we do here. The other piece that I would talk about is going back to the example of this women development program and the lady who asked, the woman leader who asked us about it, right? Can we stop fixing underrepresented groups, not just women, right? Any underrepresented group. We need to focus on fixing the system, because the problem is rarely capability, because capability is across, right? It is not genderized. It is conditions that is the challenge. So we spend too much time preparing women and underrepresented groups to survive systems that were never designed with them in mind. So the question is more to think about, are stretch roles given based on proximity or potential? Are we measuring performance and rewarding visibility over impact? So when we start thinking about this continuously, and if certain groups consistently need extra resilience to succeed, it actually means that it is not resilience what is a problem, it is actually the design which is a problem. So it could start then making us think about how we redesign the systems that we operate in to make it much more inclusive than fixing the underrepresented groups.
Thank you. Thank you, Jyothi. And I love the way the story is unfolding. Like Harish said, bias is intuitive and that there are shortcuts that we all tend to make. And Jyothi, your perspective on are we pausing enough? I'd love to hear from you, Ramya, on this question.
Sure. I was just thinking when Jyothi spoke about how we haven't developed systems for those who are potentially underrepresented. One example came to my mind. This is not related to gender diversity, but when YouTube first launched its app, and when people started uploading their videos using the app in a horizontal mode, the biggest number of questions that came from users to the group that was helping with the user questions was, help me, my video is uploading upside down. So all of the engineers who put the app together and who were trying to kind of, troubleshoot this particular problem that's occurring over and over again, were going back to their, lines and lines of codes to look at what was wrong, what's not working, only to figure out later that most of the engineers or all of the engineers who worked on the codes were right-handed, and this issue happened with those who were left-handed. When they used their left hand and in landscape mode, when they uploaded their video, it would flip. It would go upside down. And so it's just a simple example of how we do not necessarily think beyond our own circle to see what would work and what would not when we look at a little bit of a diversity there. But anyways, coming back to the question, you were talking about inclusive leaders, and I completely agree with Harish. It either happens naturally or it doesn't. So naturally, people are gifted. It's part of their DNA to be inclusive, which is great. When you're not that natural leader, what are some of those things that you can do? Or the way I would define an inclusive leader is when they become our allies. And for me, allies, let's look at it as an acronym, right? Look at A. They acknowledge and they amplify. What do they amplify? They amplify their everyone else's voice, and they acknowledge everyone's situation. A very, very quick personal example. I got a hike when I was on my maternity leave, right? And this was from a manager who gave this to me over a call to tell me that I deserved a hike and I had to get a market correction. And my letter would be given to me via email in a couple of weeks. I literally had tears in my eyes. This was way back in my career, and I did not expect this to happen. So they know that no biological clock can stop a woman from getting what they have to get. So they acknowledge, they amplify. Second, they listen. They talk less, they listen more. Third, they have a large heart. They always have space for everyone and time for everyone. Third, they empathize. Empathize is not fluff. It's not a skill that is good to have. Empathy is the number one leadership skill that is expected in every leader, as per Harvard Business Review research done recently. So one quick example on empathy, again, a personal example. In Singapore, back in those days, this was many, many years ago, when I was going through my pregnancy as an expat, the medical insurance for expats did not cover pregnancy, right? And delivering a baby in Singapore is super expensive. My manager acknowledged that. This is a different one, by the way, acknowledged that, and found out a way to give me an extended medical insurance, which brought down my pregnancy expense burden by 70%. I didn't ask for it. They did it anyways. So that's empathy in action. And finally, S, they set you up for success. In a room full of opportunities, they'll bring up your name. Another personal example, in an integration meeting with 100 plus decision makers in Paris, my manager called out my name for an opportunity in California. And guess what? I got that opportunity. Had she not called out my name, I wouldn't have gotten that opportunity at all. So simply, for me, inclusive leaders become our allies who acknowledge, amplify, who listen, who have a large heart, who include, who empathize, and who set people up for success. So that's who I try to be on a day-to-day basis. I've thankfully been nurtured and helped by managers who practice this and who have this natural gig to be inclusive. And that's what I try and replicate on a daily basis. It is tough. It's no joke. It is tough because there are multiple priorities that you are going through as an individual, as a people leader, as a human resources professional. Sometimes time becomes an issue, but it's all about juggling.
Thank you, Ramya. That's beautiful. That's some real tangible examples that people can take away there. Let's bring the audience back in on this note. So there's another poll that should quickly come up on your chat. And this time the question is, as a leader within your organization, or if you're an individual contributor, think about what you would like leaders to do differently, more importantly, to give differently starting today. So the options are how they allocate opportunities, how they evaluate performance, how they sponsor and mentor, and how they run meetings. So take about 30 seconds to quickly, put in your initial thoughts. And I can see the numbers rising for opportunity allocation, sponsoring, and mentoring. And I think that was a beautiful example that Ramya brought in terms of, sponsorship is really being spoken about when you're not in the room. And it goes a long way to set up someone for success. Interesting. So almost an equal allocation between opportunities and sponsorship and mentoring, but keep the responses coming in. We'll quickly move on to the third segment of the conversation, which is the action-oriented lens. And I'll make a quick reference to Adam Grant's book, Give and Take. He talks about givers, takers, and matchers. And his research suggests that givers, those who tend to give more strategically, are far more successful in life than takers and even matchers. Matchers are those who kind of give only when there's something to take. So on that note, I'd like to ask Jyothi the question first this time. What is within our locus of control, Jyothi, to give differently to all colleagues around us, not just women, but to all colleagues, and make the workplace more inclusive?
And the poll actually gave me the idea, right? The first easy thing that we can do about is give access. And access is more powerful than advice, I believe. So the question is there fairness in how we provide access, like how we run meetings, how we do performance appraisals? But yes, giving that access is so powerful. And what it looks like is for me would be, say, inviting someone where they are not expected to be to a forum where you are in a position to showcase and help them stretch their own possibilities, recommending them for something that they would have not really thought about, providing them for opportunities of visibility, right? Sometimes the most powerful thing we can give is a room, and this will directly connect us, or it will connect us to the visibility bias that exists in the system, right? How do we get visibility? The other thing, and there were references in the conversation to psychological safety, and I'll go back to that and talk about, okay, do we give air cover to our people, right? And again, can we have leaders that model this for psychological safety, because small things matter? Asking for a different view before closing a decision, rotating who speaks first in meetings. These are small, small things that could actually change the way that we create. And I'll probably go back to, interrupting bias and let's fix the ecosystem. And the reason I go back there again and again is that the way we could all give as and correct these bias hotspot is first being aware as an individual of how our awareness levels and how our own awareness levels are, and how it translates into behaviors and patterns. Are we modeling the actions that we expect in the context of fairness? So the moment the locus of control is within us, right? So focus on yourself, and then go beyond to nudge people around to see how we can actually interrupt as well as support creating a better ecosystem.
Thank you. Examine your own biases and patterns is something I take away from this. Ramya, if you could take on that question, please.
So you mentioned Adam Grant. I'm a huge fan of that book, Give and Take. And in fact, to just extend to what you mentioned about givers, Adam also says that the most meaningful way to succeed is to help others succeed. It's brilliant how he puts it. And I think as leaders, we have that necessity to make everyone succeed. That's how I would probably begin this segment, right? And one other individual that I absolutely admire and their piece of work is Daniel Kahneman. And in his book, if you've not read this book, anyone thinking fast and slow, if you want to learn about bias, this is the book. Thinking fast and slow, he talks about systems one thinking, systems two thinking. And Jyothi, you did talk about taking that pause, and he mentions this in his book. He talks about systems one thinking, which is based on your mental shortcuts, right? Your biases, basically. And then systems two thinking is based on logic. It's based on analysis, on data. So objective ways of making decisions. So he says that when you're trying to make an important decision, people or business decision, take a pause and look at whether you're making that decision based on just the way you think and feel and your gut, or is it based on actual data? Right, then that would ensure that you're able to mitigate that little bias if you may have in that decision and get you to be on the right path of decision making. That's number one. What else can I say about this? I think we spoke a little bit about the bias hotspot. So I would like to give a little tool we could use to mitigate bias other than the pause, which is, we call it the swap it or the flip it method, right? Now, assume that you're giving a feedback. You're writing down a feedback. You're going to have a performance conversation with someone, and you're writing down, she is very ambitious. Now, just swap the gender and write it down as he is very ambitious. And then see if there is a change in the interpretation of that particular line. Because when you generally write down she is very ambitious, you're alluding to the fact or the misconceived fact that she comes across as too aggressive. Vis-a-vis, for men, when you write it down as he's very ambitious, you often see that as a leadership potential. So a simple way to kind of put a tab on your own bias is to do that swap it or the flip it method, to simply change the gender or the ethnicity or the race or anything else that's potentially creating that bias in you, to go ahead and say, will my perception or interpretation change if I do simply swap, right, that element? So I would probably add these 2 points and hand it over to you, Leah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing a quick hack or tool that we can all use. And I think the quality of feedback that's given or accepted, uh, that's an area that needs to be examined where inclusivity is concerned. Harish, over to you.
Yeah, I guess very little to add given both what Jyothi and Ramya have covered. But I would say I'll probably kind of bring a different perspective given I'm a male leader and I have also seen the kind of recent challenge where I've got this feedback from many team members that women leaders have become really hard on their team members, particularly women. The reason being is that they've got to where they've got to with like huge amount of hard work, huge amount of fighting, because clearly they went through that whole journey when awareness was also not there. So they had to really kind of go that extra mile to kind of get to where they got to. So there is kind of bias in their action uh, to not kind of make the upcoming women entitled for what they should get. They have to also equally work hard and earn it. Nobody kind of, I guess, doubt that particular. Everyone has to earn and before kind of they get it. But I think there is that kind of element of bias built in both sets of genders. Um, but going back to the principal point that Dia, you wanted us to kind of respond is like giving to gain. I think giving is the best way to kind of get better. More practice you give, more scenario testing you do, and it makes you overall better. For me, all the things that Ramya and Jyothi have expressed absolutely makes sense. Those are kind of practical tips. If one other thing I need to kind of call out is again focusing on that listening bit. You can't just assume because that's where your intuition, your gut feeling kind of kick in, and you could have those deep biases playing out in your actions. So I think listening is critical for me over and above what both Ramya and Jyothi said.
Thank you.
I'd just
Thank you,
like to
Harish. Yeah.
very, very quickly add to what Harish was mentioning earlier. I don't remember which research was this, but it was an interesting research when Harish, you talked about women bosses. There was this study done to figure out who do male, team members want to work with. They all pretty much unanimously said that they want to work with the male bosses, right, and never with a female boss. And guess what? Even the women wanted to work with a male boss and not with a female boss. That was the study. I'm just not able to recollect which one and exact statistics, but that's the hard source of truth when you mention that particular point.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you for those responses. Now we'll move into the rapid fire, but just in the interest of time, I'll probably have just 2-3 questions for the rapid fire round, and then we'll go to the audience Q&A because that is coming up. So if inclusion were a color, what would that be for you, Jyothi?
I'll go with gray because I feel that it's a lot of ambiguity. It's not black and white, and you have to be comfortable with that.
Lovely. Thank you. And Harish, what about for you?
For me, it's multiple colors. Actually, there's no one color. So for me, the one thing that comes in mind is rainbow color.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Ramya?
I would write on that as well. For me, it's a spectrum because inclusion must have space for all of the shades. But if I have to call out one particular color, potentially green, which is also my brand color and kind of denotes prosperity and growth. So yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. A movie that captures the power of inclusion. Jyothi.
I recently saw The Intern again, talks about generational diversity so much. But my all-time favorite would be actually Chak De, because one, I'm a huge fan, and two, of course, Mr. Shah Rukh Khan, the person. And I also strongly felt um, that film actually brought out inclusion through belief. So I really like it for that.
Thank you. Ramya, what about you?
I love Chakde as well, and The Intern. I think I'll go with The Hidden Figures. It's a movie based on a real story of these three African-American mathematicians who helped an astronaut get into orbit, right? Beautiful movie, must watch.
Great. So we've got some book and movie recommendations before the weekend. Thank you. Harish, what about for you?
Yeah, again, similar. I think the sports-based movies are kind of more reflective of inclusion. So the two names that come to my mind are Lagan, again, very inclusive, people from different background. Again, less about gender, but more about the capability and the background that they were bringing. And the other one is, of course, Chakde that you have already heard.
Wonderful. Thank you. I've got a few more, but I'll probably just take the audience Q&A first, and if we're able to address all of that, we'll come back. Okay, so there are a couple of questions for you, Ramya, specifically addressed to you, and maybe I'll take those up first. Could you help elaborate why women are evaluated on performance and why not on potential?
Great question. And evaluated on performance, and not just once, but over and over again. We've had to kind of go ahead and prove our credibility and mantle every single time there's an opportunity that's presented. And why is it so? Because that's how we are traditionally and historically looking at opportunities, right? By default, our brains are wired to look at a male when you look at a specific role or an opportunity, and we make these preconceived notions that, okay, she might have some responsibilities at home and not be in a position to give us enough time at work. Oh, she might not be able to go ahead and join us for beer nights. She might not be able to go ahead and have those customer meetings where there is extended social hours. So there are a lot of preconceived notions that come into picture. So we are trying to find performance as potentially one of the ways we could assess the individual and not look at her potential. I mean, because we have made this preconceived notion in our minds, and we're always trying to confirm that bias that we've already built in our minds about this individual who's a woman who's not ready for this role. So that's what I see as a reason why it's still kind of tagged onto performance. Well, none of these reasons can be given, but performance is a valid one that can be given to negate women from these opportunities. That's my candid response, by the way, not a very scientific one, but that's what I feel.
Thank you for that. And again, anyone can take this question. Bias is not that pronounced at more senior levels. It's more implicit rather than explicit. Would you agree?
I can just quickly say bias is never loud. It's almost always quiet. It's almost always implicit. And at the same time, privilege is also quite invisible, especially to those who have it. So I would probably say that. And I know Harish was going to answer, and I kind of went in first. Yeah, go for it.
That's okay. No, I would say that the diplomacy, as you go up the hierarchy, you kind of get tuned to the diplomacy. So therefore, even if those are deeper biases and it kind of reflected those who are around you all the time, but you sort of kind of sound better in a kind of more broader setting and public setting, and that's where it sort of kind of changes from real to kind of more like implied. The piece that you just talked about, but it's definitely there at deeper level. It's definitely visible in most of the actions and vocabulary that they use. But of course, in a public setting, they are prepared very well. They kind of get the right sound bite out there in the public forums.
Yeah, thank you both for that. Another question is that bias is everywhere, not just in the boardroom, and everyone's impacted by it. So if the question is that bias touches all of us, why are we still treating it as someone else's problem to fix? I think that's a very powerful question.
Maybe I'll take a go at that. And that's probably why I spoke about, can I first become individually aware about my own biases and give people around me the permission to call out my bias and not feel bad about it. If someone's going to call out my own bias, I'm going to feel bad, right? But if I have a safety net of my known people, my own team, or my family, I can actually improve. So it is true, and we will have to think about it from individual level to start with. And most of the individual level actually comes from what is in it for me. And unless I find the answer for what is in it for me, that is going to stay. And I need to find how I change that to create something powerful for myself.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jyothi. This is an interesting question. It was part of the rapid fire round, so I'll move quickly into that segment. If inclusive leadership is essential for innovation and creating value, what is one change that GCC leaders should immediately implement to make this happen?
I can go first, if that's helpful. I think GCC by design are very diverse workplaces. They are global organization, which means workforce of multiple countries is kind of coming together, collaborating to kind of achieve one thing or one objective that the firm has. So to drive that innovation, that appreciation and understanding of the individual culture is absolutely essential. Sadly, again, GCC, though they've been around for a long time, leadership concentration is still in the home office. Home office could be wherever they are. Uh, the diversification of leadership is still kind of work in progress, and therefore innovation is not like as widespread as you would want to see. But that's one area that they could kind of do better job as we look forward.
I
Thank you.
100%
Yes.
agree with that. It's interesting that we are working with global markets and hence automatically working with multiple cultures, perspectives. So there is this huge opportunity for neuroplasticity, right? Because our brain is going to be trained to learn as we experience this on an ongoing basis, but we are not tapping on that neuroplasticity and hence not allowing that innovation to happen, but getting tied down to BAU activities. And I think, yeah, that's kind of the last opportunity that we should all be focusing on. Great point there, Harish.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, the last rapid fire round question, and one word in terms of a door that someone has opened for you. One word or one or two words.
I won't be in HR otherwise. Someone opened the door for me.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
I think I would say Chennai, because I wouldn't be here if someone did open that door for me.
So the role, yeah, thank you. Harish?
Yeah, no, I think similar to Jyothi, I'm a qualified accountant. I would not have been in the HR if had someone not opened the door for me.
Beautiful. Thank you. We're almost at time. There were a couple of other questions. If we haven't been able to cover them, we will find a way of, posting that on GCC Pulse.
Oh yeah,
But I'd like,
I think we have. I'm so sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I think we have one
yeah.
hand raised from Mamta. Mamta, you want to quickly type in your question
Oh, yes.
here?
Thank you, Sushil. So, Sushil, the founder of GCC Pulse, is very much here behind the scenes. And thank you for giving us a true storytelling platform to bring this conversation to life.
Yeah, Mamta, if you can hear us, please. Thanks, Jia. Can you please type in your question?
Yeah, I think Mamta's written, I want to react for the opening door. Please do.
Okay. Okay. All right. So over to you, Dia. Sorry.
Okay, no, thank you. And yeah, we're almost at time. So I just want to personally thank you all for for expanding the conversation today to inclusion for everyone, not just women. We all experience the lack of it at some point or the other. And there have been numerous examples and stories that you've all shared. On behalf of GCC Pulse and Stryde, a big thank you to our speakers, Harish, Jyothi, and Ramya, for giving us valuable time for this very important conversation. And thank you for, to those who've joined us as well today. If there's any topic that you'd like to hear on next, please do type it out in the Q&A. We will keep an eye for the responses and plan our sessions accordingly. We will also be in touch for feedback, so expect an email shortly. And yeah, thank you. I really sincerely hope you walked away with a couple of new perspectives and actions that we can all individually take. So thank you once again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jyothi, Harish, Sushil. Appreciate the opportunity. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.